I first want to just talk to you about a book that I've just bought. This book is still out, still available. You can purchase it with your hard-earned pounds or dollars on Amazon if you search for it. But this book, it has the title Romans 13 and COVID-19. You see the clever juxtaposition of the two numbers?
Yes, I do.
So clever, that is. The subtitle is Knowledge, Warnings and Encouragement for the Church and World by J.L. Fuller. Order this book. It is fascinating. I haven't read it through yet, but it's been recommended to me by church leaders, and it's looking like it can be an interesting read. Now, what it is about, Beryl, just want to talk about this, is it looks about what the Bible talks about leadership in Romans 13. It relates the current situation to the misuse of Romans 13 in 1930s Germany. Right. Because it was helped to quell the resistance to Hitler.
Can you give us a brief summary of Romans 13?
Well, the part of Romans 13 that it's talking about is the importance of submitting to princes or submitting to the rulers.
And earthly powers.
Yes. So that could be used to mean, well, we're an earthly power, we're a prince. Or I'm effectively a prince if you're, for example, the Chancellor of Germany, if you're the Führer of Germany even, then you can position yourself to be someone who should submit to as Christians. That's what happened in 1930s. So it's an interesting use of the Bible, but this book points out and develops the theme, but it points out in the first instance that if you're going to take a verse about submitting to authorities, then you also need to take this verse that they quote. This is from the blurb on the back of the book. They quote Matthew 24 verse 4, to take heed that no one deceives you. So you need to take in mind that particular verse as well. It says here, this is from the blurb on the back, because we're just going to look at the theme, not do a whole review of the book. It says, the book examines biblical principles on the scope and limits of civil authority, including the misuse of Romans 13. And it surveys key aspects and implications of the COVID directives, from medical mandates to lockdowns and gene therapy rollout to systematic state propaganda and the Great Reset, all the things that we've seen happening over the past 2 years.
I've heard this term before, the Great Reset.
The Great Reset, yeah.
What does that mean?
Well, specifically in this case, it refers to a book by Klaus Schwab, who is the chair, I guess, of the World Economic Forum, which is really a think tank, but very influential, with a lot of world leaders being either part of it or influenced by it. And the concept of the Great Reset was rolled out by two figures. One was Klaus Schwab, and the other was the then Prince Charles, who is now King Charles. Right. And the Great Reset, the idea is that you use a situation in which the state and superstate organisations, globalist organisations, have needed to step in and led by dint of their expertise rather than being voted into power or having other sort of legitimacy, using that to reset everything else. So the health emergency of COVID is used to reset the economy, society, everything. It's the Great Reset. And the thing is, Beryl, this is often seen as a conspiracy theory. I've been told that it's a conspiracy theory to talk about this Great Reset, even though you can buy the book on Amazon. It's not been done in quiet. And there are YouTubes, which they pay to have disseminated, YouTube videos in which this famous phrase has now become infamous in certain circles. This is what they're looking at the future. This is to give you a picture of what the Great Reset means. They put this forward. Now, Klaus Schwab says this. He has a particular sort of Germanic accent, which makes him sound like a Bond villain. In fact, he looks like Blofeld from the Bond movies, who were trying to take over the world. Maybe that's just coincidence. But anyway, he says in this video, saying about the future, what it will look like for you if they put into place the Great Reset. They being governments across the world, and I say these supra-governmental organisations, the EU, the World Health Organisations, and others. What it will look like is this. You will own nothing, and you will be happy.
Right. That doesn't sound like it would apply to me, because things that I pay for, I consider that I own.
Well, let me put it like this. They're not asking your permission. It's not an exercise in democracy. They've just decided they want to do it. It's better for you. You don't understand. This is good for you. You will. You will be happy. You know, we have ways of making you happy. Yeah.
This sounds very much like the Third Reich.
Yes, I was putting on the accent a bit, although he does have that sort of accent. The thing is, it does seem a bit chilling. It doesn't just have echoes of the 1930s. It seems like the Nazi fascist takeover of Germany on steroids, because it's bigger, it's worldwide.
It's a global situation.
How worldwide is it? Well, I don't know how things are really panning out in Russia and China and Iran and big countries like that. But in the Western countries, it seems to be taking a grip. We don't seem to be able to escape from it. And the question that I have, raised by the fact that this book is published, in which it refers to the Bible. This is again from the blurb. Unlike the news media and official guidance, this book is free of hype, spin and COVID fear-mongering. And it goes on to say, it will give you encouragement and practical guidance for living fully and fearlessly in the joy of a closer walk with God. The real way to be happy, I think, rather than the Great Reset. But that being the case, if a book can be written that puts across that, where are all the Christians crying out against the Great Reset and the taking away of liberties in the name of health policy?
Perhaps because for some human being to arise who can lead them in leading the world to Christianity.
From the way you say that, you think that's a deception, right? You think that's the ultimate deception?
Well, I suppose it would be a hope. But I don't put my trust in human beings
But isn't
at all.
that the biblical concept of the Antichrist mentioned in John's letters towards the end of the Bible? The spirit of the Antichrist is mentioned. I mean, it was happening when Jesus was around, but it's describing this is how the world is. You have the Antichrist coming, people who are against Christ. The way it's put is they are against Christ, but it's more than that. They take the place of Christ. So when you were saying that, that's exactly what I was thinking. You have someone who says, don't worry, I'll sort it out. It does, of course, echo the famous phrase from Ronald Reagan, who said the 9 most frightening words in the English language are, I'm from the government, I'm here to help. And that is terrifying. Someone coming like that who is above governments, maybe Klaus Schwab himself, maybe someone who replaces him, could be a very scary figure and could be doing the work of the devil.
Yes. We are very easily, as human beings, deceived, aren't we?
Just taking from this book, from the theme of this book. Now, I haven't read the whole book, so I don't know if this theme is drawn out of it. I would draw this out of it. And that is, I would draw out from current trends that there's a new philosophy which you might call safetyism. People aren't allowed to die anymore. Risk is just not allowed. So when we were talking about the COVID policy, they would say it was if one person is safe from dying of COVID, all this has been enough. All this closing down our whole economy, art, music, worship, economic, the whole of the economy, including small businesses, entrepreneurs, everyone is closed down. Just stop it. You can't even meet together, no society, because one person might die of COVID. That's just a weird thing to do, isn't it? And yet, the same people, literally the same people, are advocating for sending weapons to Ukraine, which are going to kill quite a few people. That's what they're intended for. So, which is it? You know, are we for safety or are we for killing people? Which is it? I don't understand it.
Human beings are for safety. They have a fear. Humanity seems to be afraid of death. If they were to turn to Christ and understand Christ's understanding of death, they wouldn't be afraid.
We're going to continue, I think, just a few minutes on that thought, because right at the start of this show, each time I do the intro and then I introduce you, we start. But right before that, I say that Beryl and Pete look out on the world of news from a Christian worldview point of view. And I think that's the key thing here. Even a lot of Christians don't actually have the Christian worldview. They don't see it. They don't get it. A study of Romans 13 might help how we fit into society. There are meant to be local magistrates or equivalent who deal with local issues. There's meant to be a government, a prince running the whole nation, big things. But they're limited in what they're meant to do. They're meant to operate within, and this is quite clear in the Bible, within God's law. They are under God and in God's law, and there's also leaders of worship, priests in the Old Testament. We don't have priestly worship because that involves animal sacrifice, strictly speaking, but we do have people who lead worship, pastors, worship leaders. But when he talks about government, even the centre of worship, it's in the family. It's very small. It's local family. And in the individual, you're expected to make your own decision. When you look at what it's described, when the wicked man turns from his sin, he does what is good, he shall save his soul alive, it says. I read that Bible verse out at the start of services sometime. And what it is a call for individuals to make decisions that affect them. Individual decisions are made. I think Christianity is about community, but it's about individuals deciding to involve themselves in community, and individual families deciding decided to. So we can look at the Ten Commandments and look at how the importance is that, in fact, you honour your father and mother. It's a family-centred way of running the world. It's not a top-down command. There's God, and then there's you and your family, and then you relate to the rest of the world.
In defence of the government, they would say their job is to protect the citizens of the country, though.
They would say that, yes. And I would say, just butt out. Just leave me alone. This is why the problem is. I will take the risks and even die if I want to. Let me take my own risks. It isn't the government's responsibility to keep me safe, protect me, the country from invasion. It's the government's responsibility to keep basic civil order. And you could argue maybe to make sure that the roads are built. But why is it the national government's responsibility to keep me safe from catching a cough?
But what about the rogue person who is just dissatisfied with the world and everything and wants to communicate this disease to as many people as he can?
So if someone had a deadly disease, let's invent a new disease and it's absolutely deadly and this person is a horrible person, wants to go and spread it around, then stop him, that person. You can't have a general policy because most people won't. Put it another way, you see, an individual might want to go around driving his car into people, and in fact people do it.
Yes,
but we don't stop people from driving cars. That's what I mean.
Okay.
Stop the individual. You know, you can guarantee people are going to die if you run over them in a car. It's not the government's business to keep us safe.
Right.
That's my opinion.
Yes.
What do you think, Beryl, is? Let's take another example so we can say, is it right for them to keep them safe? The government puts into place a law to stop you doing something that's dangerous for you. A law against something that I hate people doing, which is smoking. Like, smoking is effectively banned. It's banned in all common places. I don't think there should be a law banning smoking. What do you think?
Well, I've major part of my life in which there hasn't been a law preventing people smoking.
Yes.
It hasn't bothered me over much. I just don't go to those places where I know there will be a lot of people smoking, and I prefer the fresh air.
It's improved my life in that I quite like going to the pub, and pubs were always smoky, and in the end I very rarely went because of the smoke.
Right.
And when people stopped being able to smoke, I started going again. But I'm all for individual freedom.
Yes.
And so I don't think you should have a law. I don't mind an establishment saying you can't smoke. And in the past I've had occasions, someone lights up, you mention it, and the establishment won't stop them. Maybe because they're spending a lot of money.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I would say that's fair enough. And on one occasion I did exactly this. I'd put in the order for my food. They wouldn't stop the other people smoking, so we left and said, that's not part of the agreement. You know, so even though I've ordered, I'm not paying you, and I'm not going to eat the food because you won't stop these people smoking on the table next to me. So I went to a different restaurant. That's their individual decision as a restaurant. You see, overall, they probably made money because it was a much bigger party of people who were doing the smoking. So I didn't hurt them financially, I don't think, other than the price of my meal. But that's fair enough. But I don't think the government should be telling them not to do it, or vice versa.
Well, I wouldn't say that smoking has never affected me, because there have been people in distant family who have smoked, and I've been very glad to have got out of that atmosphere.
Yeah. Now, let me take it on to another level of health. Health is, in the theme of this book, it's the health policy that has been used to bring about this tyranny. So hence the Romans 13 and COVID-19, and the deception of thinking as Christians we should obey what we're told. But these sort of regulations that are put in on health, with the government deciding that it's going to keep you safe, can affect us. For example, the government, including its health service, the National Health Service in Britain, still promotes a carbohydrate-based diet. Even though just general wisdom, the old wives' tales, the perceived wisdom down through the centuries, is rather that you have a fat and protein-based diet with some carbohydrates, but the majority of your calories, as we will put it this day, the majority of your energy coming from fat. Now, despite the fact that the science is disputed on it, despite the wisdom of the ages saying it should be fat and protein-based with some carbohydrate, they persist. If you look on the NHS website now, it's telling you to eat carbohydrates. And right from after the Second World War, I guess you could say from 1960s onwards, the sugar industry has been promoting eating lots of sugar, and there's big industries based around it. Fair enough. But the government is telling you that we're going to keep you safe by telling you to eat carbohydrates as the basis of your diet. And what I think they should do is keep out of it. It's led to so many people having diabetes, which is the main risk factor. Being overweight and having diabetes was the main risk factor for people we mentioned earlier who died of COVID. Mm-hmm. So the government should just keep out. What do you think of that?
I do have an opinion about it. I think, too, they should keep out, and I have arguments about it. I've tried one recently with sugar. The government would tell us that we shouldn't be having sugar. I proved in myself, because about 4 months ago, I stopped sugar in my diet.
Yes.
For a particular reason. And it has helped me. But I don't think there were people even then at that time who thought that my intake of sugar was causing diabetes, but that has never been proved. I've had a number of tests to test whether I have diabetes, and I don't.
Just to go back to our theme, the use of a medical emergency to introduce more power is bad.
Yes, I agree.
But I would go further than that, say. Big government is always bad.
Perhaps we should leave it there.
But we do want to get the views of listeners, the opinions of listeners. Let us know. Go to berylandpete.com. Make sure you're subscribed and you can leave a comment on this and every episode, or if you're listening to this on Flame Radio, you know what you've got to do. Email the station, flameccr@gmail.com. Will get through to us, and we'll be sure to take on board your comments, even if they disagree with ours, even though we're right.
Yes.
That's it for Romans 13 and COVID-19, a book by J.L. Fuller. We were just looking at the main theme that it introduced. Romans 13, which it says that you should obey earthly rulers, can be misused and has been misused to see people both back in the 1930s in Germany and now.